let's get in the big story. Nigeria's National Petroleum Company, or NNPC Limited, today announced a profit of 3.3 trillion naira for the full year 2023. That earnings announcement came just as the cable and online news media reveals that the NNPC had received the approval of the Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to convert the dividend payable to the government for 2023 into fuel subsidy payments. Just a few weeks ago, as a reminder, the NNPC was shopping for a cash loan of $2 billion to fund its operations. So, what is the true state of the NNPC and how impactful on the lives and the economy of 200 million Nigerians is this organization? My guest on this tonight is Kelvin Emmanuel, an economist and a public policy analyst. Kelvin is live to us from our Abuja studios. A great Monday evening to you, sir. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege to be here.
Thank you so much. Some good news from the NNPC just declared 3.3 trillion naira profit for last year. What's your take on that? That's a whole lot of money.
The money has already been spent. I don't think it's good news. And the reason why I said I don't think it's good news is because it's interesting that just a few hours after it was reported that the president had approved for the NNPC to use the remittance it's supposed to have done from January to August 2024 to defray for the cost of under-recovery on about 800,000 metric tons of PMS per month. The NNPC announced that its net profit is at 3.3 trillion naira. That money has already been spent. It's paper profits. You know, it's the regular, interim dividend to the shareholder, which is the federating unit, the FGN. But the money has already been spent because that money has been used to defray the cost of under-recovery on PMS. So the question we should ask ourselves is, why are we still importing PMS, number one? Does Nigeria actually consume 70 million liters of PMS on a daily basis? Can the regulatory agencies provide evidence to show?
Kelvin, we're going to get to that in just a second. Based on these earnings results that we saw, what we are looking at right now is the fact that there was a 3.3 trillion naira that was made by NNPC last year. So my question was business so good last year? If you look at some of the other graphics we're going to bring on in terms of what our NNPC ended up last year in terms of our total asset it has on its books and all that. So I'm trying to understand where the 3.3 trillion naira actually came from.
Well, NNPC pays, usually gets like tax oil and royalty oil. If you look at the upstream asset that it holds on behalf of the federal government of Nigeria, according to the Petroleum Industry Act, I'll say cumulative average, NNPC has 55% of blocks, both deep offshore, mid-shore, and onshore. NNPC also has a gas business, a Nigerian Gas Management Company, a Nigerian Gas Infrastructure Company, so it sells gas on behalf of Nigeria. It also has a power business. It's building an IPP plant. I think power is going to be like a great part of its future stock of business lines, very productive business lines in the future. NNPC, if it's properly managed, can even turn out in the future to be one of the biggest generating companies in Nigeria for power. It also has a trading arm, of course, that came from Duke Oil to NNPC Trading Limited. So it has quite a number of arms. But the major revenue earner, the cash cow, is NNPC Exploration and Production Limited, NNPC E&P Limited, which holds like 55% on the cumulative average on that production sharing contract and original joint ventures offshore for both onshore shallow waters and deep offshore. If you have the independent petroleum producers group, national oil companies, and you can see very well that over the last 12 to 24 months, there's been a migration of the IOCs from onshore and shallow waters to deep offshore. You've seen Shell to Aradel, you've seen Seplat to Mobile to Seplat, which is currently ongoing and has not gotten ministerial consent. You've seen Total to Chapal Energy. And, so there is a migration. So NNPC E&P is a major cash earner. So the question we should ask is for tax oil, and royalty oil, is $2 billion a true representation of what NNPC should be doing, considering the amount of assets it has deep upstream? This is the question we should ask. So if you look at all these assets and you consider that E&P is the major side of his business, is $2 billion a true representation of what he should be doing today?
Okay, so I'm just ask that. But based on what we know, what's practically on the news on a daily basis, do you really know what to describe? Is it the true state of the NNPC? Does anyone really know the true state of the NNPC?
Well, you know, NNPC has not agreed to open its books to external forensic audit, not the audit that it does. It says it does external audit on a yearly basis. I think the government should order for an external forensic audit, you know, to determine the true state of its balance sheet. You see very well that NNPC also has one of the business lines I forgot to mention is NNPC Refinery Chemical Limited, which runs the 4 government-owned refineries in Nigeria. And if I take you back to 2006, when the OBJ-led government had concessioned the Kaduna Refinery to Chinese National Petroleum Corporation, CNPC, for $100 million, and it concessioned the Port Harcourt Refinery to Blue Star Consortium that was run by Alhaji Aliko Dangote and Femi Otedola for $100 million. And you go back to 2007 when it was reversed because some people felt like the amount that was used to concession those refineries was actually small. You consider that CNPC actually had a plan of creating an export pipeline from Niger Republic to Kaduna to supply feedstock to Nigeria, to Kaduna, because Nigeria is closer to Kaduna than Port Harcourt or any producing state in the Niger Delta. It is east to Kaduna, you know, and, you know, engage in turnaround maintenance and bring up that refinery. So, but there's no point crying over spilled milk. But today, what you have is that over the last 20 years, NNPC has failed to, you know, bring those refineries up, and it has gone from oil processing agreements, where the PPMC was running, it's gone to DSDP, and in 2019, it migrated from revenue to debt, and it migrated to using Nigeria's crude oil to pay traders to bring in PMS in a value mismatch. Yes. That led to, you know, shortage of revenue for the government and FX for Central Bank of Nigeria to settle its balance of payment obligations. And the reason why this conversation is especially important is because the refineries today are a drag. The overhead costs, the operating expenditure for the refineries are, I think, over 200 billion as at the last count on a yearly basis, considering that the refineries are not refining a drop of crude oil as we speak. You know, and the turnaround maintenance, the last one that was approved in 2019 for $1.5 billion has not produced any results so far. You know, so you see that NNPC on its balance sheet has valuable assets, it has debt assets. The question is, are we going to go from it being government controlled to it being market driven?
Yeah, so that's my question. That's my question. Kelvin, Emmanuel, in terms of the solvency of the NNPC, but based on what we know, those assets, you see the numbers and you just talk about the subsidiaries and all of that. So can we conveniently, safely say that the NNPC is still a going concern?
Well,
or is that going concern? Or is that going concern with a question mark?
In my view, like I've always said, that the NNPC as it's currently constituted and run is not sustainable. Nigeria has no business having a 52% debt to GDP ratio. For example, you can see that the Federal Ministry of Finance is trying to raise $500 million in onshore bonds from domestic foreign currency accounts. And if you look at the price discovery on that, you're going to have anywhere around 6% secured overnight financing rate, so free, with anywhere around another 4% country risk premium, because the yields on Eurobonds are between 4 and 6%. So you're going to have to, you know, provide investors with an additional comfort to invest in a market that is more risky than Eurobonds market, you know, for them to subscribe to it. The cost of capital for a US dollar denominated loan is high. If Nigeria is going to look for $2 billion by, you know, floating a domestic bond in phases, instead of doubling down on a state national oil company like other countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia are doing to be able to raise the revenues it needs to fund its budget and also save in its sovereign wealth fund, then you see that NNPC is comatose and it's just being managed.
Okay, so
and what
managed.
they're doing
okay.
is a theater, is a drama.
Okay, so let's get to what I'm sure is on the mind of most Nigerians who don't really understand how many subsidies does NNPC have, how does it work? So that brings us to the issue of subsidy. Do you have any ideas, Kelvin, as to where Nigeria's fuel subsidy is right now, based on what the oil market realities really is? Where is fuel subsidy?
Well, I'll tell you that I, for one, have questioned the landing price on petrol because I think anywhere around maybe 25 to 30% of the petrol Nigerians consume is actually adulterated. It comes from curing off-spec petrol. The recent reports with documents shows that Nigeria typically is routing off-spec petrol from Russia, which is under sanctions by the G7, the European Union, and Australia. Through Malta, through blending plants in Malta to cure it, mix it with chemicals that fails certification standards according to American Society for Testing and Material Standards, which is the most globally recognized standards for gasoline testing. So anywhere around a third of what Nigerians consume is actually questionable and calls for audits by the government. For the landing price on petrol, because of the issues around the fact that the government has not been very transparent with Nigerians on the actual true north of how much PMS Nigerians consume on a daily basis. I'll put that number at 35 million liters per day. Because in 2011, Nigeria was consuming anywhere between 22 and 24 million liters. And the population of Nigeria has not gone up by 50% over the last 12 years. So you can't convince me otherwise that the consumption has gone up by more than 100% in 12 years. You also have the issue of the fact that when the president announced the removal of petrol subsidy last year, when he assumed office, the exchange rate was under 800 naira to US dollar. The naira has dropped nearly 100% since then. And what you've had basically is that you've had the cost increase. So for the first 2 months after he resumed, June and July, there was actually no subsidy under recovery on PMS. But after that, when the exchange rate started to take off, when you started seeing like a black market premium between the official and black market rates, what you typically have was that the costs for landing PMS in Nigeria kept shooting up. And it's where it is today, anywhere around 1,150 naira to a US dollar. I'll put it on 65 to 70% of what Nigerians consume on a daily basis. So effectively, what the government is paying is, the government is paying at least 500 naira on every liter of PMS that is claimed to be consumed in Nigeria.
Okay, so now we've got this, Kelvin, as it were, news out of the cable online reporting that the government says this dividend should be used for subsidy payment. What do you make of that? What does that go back to the question? Where is this subsidy? Is it here? Is it there? Where is it? Is subsidy gone? Is it back in some form? Is it fully back on the table? What exactly are we dealing with? Do you know?
The subsidy is fully back on the table. The subsidy is fully back on the table. And I'm not surprised with the report by the cable because I can tell you that since January of 2024, NNPC has not remitted monies or as royalties to the Federation account through NUPRC, less than 4% NUPRC actually keeps as their cost of collection. NNPC has not remitted money since January. So what you've seen basically is that there's been some financial engineering in between the Minister of Finance and NNPC and the Central Bank, where they basically agreed that, listen, the government is supposed to pay subsidy, questionable, in my opinion, questionable numbers, like I've said, because the government has not audited what Nigerians actually consume on a daily basis, okay? And you've not remitted royalties to the federal government through NUPRC. So what we're going to do is we're going to defray what the government owes you by the dividends you're going to declare for the government being the major shareholder in state-owned enterprise. That's what you've seen. So what they've declared today is just paper profit. The money has already been spent. And as a matter of fact, I'll tell you Now, NNPC owes international traders billions of dollars, and that's the reason why NNPC is currently working with a book runner through a bank that's one of the external asset managers to the central bank to raise $2 billion to draw down on that loan.
But the NNPC says, the head of corporate communications says it's now owing 6.8 whatever billions of dollars. He said that's been denied. It's in the news.
In the press release, he said he's not owing.
Yes.
And in the same press release, he says it's normal to owe at one point or the other in the oil business. It said it, and then it contradicted itself. NNPC cannot claim, and I'll tell you, one of the reasons why you have petrol scarcity today is because currently as we speak, right, the transaction, the T60 transaction for 60 days for reconciliation of payments, the traders, for the vendors who supply Nigeria PMS on about 70% of its consumption, has gone into demurrage. And in my calculation, it's attracting anywhere around $1.3 million in LIBOR plus country risk premium of 6.5 to 7% of about $476 million in interest on a yearly basis. I've prorated it, and it's currently gone into demurrage. So one of the reasons why you've seen scarcity today is the fact that the traders have actually said, and for example, international oil traders are different from the international oil companies, so they are not the same at all. The traders have actually said that they are not going to supply the Nigerian markets with PMS unless they are paid by crude cargoes, which the NNPC is struggling to pay, or they are paid in cash. So that's the situation you're seeing.
So we'll talk about the oil traders. We're talking about
statement that
Vitol, Trafigura, the rest of them, as different from Chevron, Texaco, Chevron, ExxonMobil, and the rest of them. But again, I'm coming back to this particular issue, because you've seen NNPC pledging future oil for today's cash, and all of that. And then now the federal government, if we believe, and if the story in the cable online news wire is correct, that the president, Mr. President, sign off that the dividend should be used. In other words, what would that mean for the government that sorely need every naira, every dollar on the table, not only to share to the 3 tiers of government, but also that needs this money for the various initiatives that Mr. President is putting on the table for youth, for women, for others, and all of that. Where would the money come from? Because this is the NNPC in my life, in your life, in every 200 million Nigerian lives. There's none of us, including Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu himself, that can do without the NNPC. And that's the truth.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't think the government can officially come and make a statement that they've used the supposed remittance through NUPRC less than 4% cost of collection to defray the cost of PMS subsidies that I think is over bloated and lacks audit. And the reason why I don't think they can do that is because revenues from NNPC that goes to the federation account is actually due to the federating units, the federal government, the state government, and the local government. And considering recently that the Supreme Court judgment
sorry, Kelvin,
has given...
Kelvin, I've got to respectfully cut in there. Let's hold on those thoughts. Let's continue from there. Let's take this break. We'll bring back everyone. We're discussing the state of the NNPC. What do we know? What do Nigerians need to know? We'll be right back with Kelvin Emmanuel, live from Abuja studios after this. We'll be right back, everyone. Yeah, the biggest conversation today was the Nigeria's National Petroleum Company Limited, the NNPC, reporting a 3.3 trillion naira profit for the full year 2023. Says it's the biggest in its history since its establishment. Of course, it's been a big story with the news going through that the government has approved that its dividend for last year be used to defray the cost of fuel subsidies. So the question is, the fuel subsidy here, there, and where? What's the future of the Nigerian economy and an average Nigerian in relation to the NNPC? My guest has been speaking over the last 30 minutes on that is a Kelvin Emmanuel, economist and a public policy analyst out of Abuja studios. Thank you so much. We're just talking about the economic realities of every Nigerian's life tied to the apron of the NNPC in a manner of speaking. We could hardly sleep, breathe, work, enjoy, do anything without the NNPC accounting for a chunk of our energy needs as well as everything in our life. The government also needs the NNPC money. Whether it goes to the Federation account, it goes to the central bank, whatever it is. So NNPC is in everybody's back pocket. How important is where we are right now about what happens to the NNPC? Why should it be of very serious concern to every Nigerian?
Well, I think, I'm surprised, for example, that the Nigerian Governors Forum being like one of the major stakeholders in the Federal Account Allocation Committee has not passed a vote of no confidence on the management of NNPC, considering how the company is being run. I also think that with the recent Supreme Court decision, the Association of Local Government of Nigeria, ALGON, needs to reconstitute. And it's my view that ALGON needs to have a representative at the National Economic Council and at the Federal Executive Council, because they are also major stakeholders in the Federal Account Allocation Committee. I think the principles of derivation, the sharing formula is anywhere between 55, 29, and 16. 29 goes to states, 16 goes to local governments. So, like I said, the reason why I don't think the government can put out an official statement is because if it does, then the Nigerian Governors Forum might take the federal government to court on why the federal government would take a decision to have an NPC defray subsidy with the remittance is supposed to get on royalties without consulting them. And I think it's especially important because we need to raise our revenue to GDP ratio. We need to raise our tax to GDP ratio. We need to go away from a fiscal strategy paper in a medium-term expenditure framework that focuses on debt as a way to finance government deficits in the budget. Now that the government has capped Ways and Means at 10% of previous year's real revenues, and the government is proposing to have like a hard clause that says that the federal government cannot borrow from the Central Bank of Nigeria unless it pledges its share of FAC, and it's not going to exceed 3 months unless the CBN is going to debit from source. We need to raise revenues and ensure that the amount of deficit in the budget continues to shrink and the government does not continue to take expensive loans. I just found out that the government has issued the domestic bond and the yields are 9.75%. 6% so free and about 3.75% country risk premium. It's expensive to borrow from the bonds market at this rate, considering the inflation to interest yield curve and the MPR rates. You can see that this is the first time in about 22 months that you're having a slowdown in inflation. But even at the next NPC meeting, I don't expect that the NPC is going to cut the interest rate. I think they are going to hold, and not cut and see what the next month brings out in terms of the inflation report. So when we consider all these realities and the impact on the fact that where we are today with our exchange rate, with our interest rates, and with our inflation, it can be traced back to the fact that NNPC migrated into all these crude oil swaps and wholesale agreements, and instead of sell the crude oil and raise revenue to balance payments for CBN and to ensure that the government reduces its deficit in the budget, it went to the strategy it has now. So it's important that we change our approach and our strategy, and see that, first of all, NNPC can, go to a beneficial owner. And this is what I think the government should do. The government needs to hand NNPC off to an asset manager, to look at the books, to audit, do business process reengineering, send it to the capital markets to raise money, to invest in non-associated gas wells upstream to increase Nigeria's daily output, supply NLNG with the feedstock it needs, supply the domestic gas delivery obligations according to sections 108 of the PIA. NNPC needs to migrate from unregistered joint ventures and production sharing contracts, needs to go to incorporated joint venture model according to section 65 of the PIA as a means to, very importantly, do shared FID so that it can move from where it says, okay, $5 billion it is to develop this well, we don't have the money. You put up all the costs in what they call carried costs and carried interest in upstream oil and gas. We're going to pay you through joint venture cash calls, in amortized capex and opex over a period of years, over the asset life of shelf life of the asset. This model has not worked, and this model is not the model that the IOCs want to continue going forward because of how much of JV cash costs NNPC has owed them over the last 10 years. We need to change our strategy. And the first step, Mr. President, as he goes on to France on a brief work holiday, needs to consider is to actually ensure that it can make the tough decision of sending NNPC to an asset manager and start the process of unbundling that entity from a public-owned enterprise into a market-driven enterprise. Yeah. That's how I think we can make progress.
Great, some good suggestions there. But let's go back to the elephant in the room, which is fuel subsidy. At the rate at which we're going, no one is really sure what the price of petrol would be tomorrow, tonight, whatever. I'm trying to be very careful, and I'm not too sure where the subsidy is. But definitely it's not here with me. So I'm trying to understand if you know where it is and how we're going to deal with it. And what do you think is the realistic expectations of Nigerians as to a price of petrol? Here we are in August. We're just a few months to the end of the year, and folks will be making plans for the year end. What do you think Nigeria should expect, carefully worded, in terms of what the price of petrol will be?
I don't think Nigerians can accommodate any further increases in price, and this is the reason why I've always advocated.
The price is already up, my friend. We're not talking about 980, 850, whatever. So the price is already up.
That's because there is no petroleum equalization fund to create a uniformity in price across the states in Nigeria.
Why should we have uniformity of petrol prices in Nigeria? Why should that happen?
No, that's the problem, because if you say that the government regulated price is 605 or 620 naira per liter, you cannot get that price in Maiduguri, you cannot get that price in Aba, you cannot get that price in Yenegua because of the cost of haulage from depot to those filling stations. So what I think we need to do, very importantly, and I'm happy that the technical committee, the Federal Ministry of Finance, the Joint Committee has agreed that from October 1, they will start obeying sections 109 of the PIA, which is to supply domestic refiners with crude oil in Naira. It's a good step in the right direction.
Why would they disobey that in the first instance? Why would they do that? The law is there. Why do you disobey?
Well,
why would they not carry it out?
Well, until now, this is when the government has agreed to obey the PIA. I think the government is trying to course correct because it's never had a functional commercial refinery in Nigeria. But we need to migrate our strategy, our oil strategy, from exports and FSAs and crude oil swaps and import of petroleum products to guaranteeing that all the active refineries get crude oil feedstock to reach full capacity utilization for their installed capacity. If Dangote can produce 50 million liters of PMS on a daily basis, what the government can do basically is to apply a share in the refinery, for example, and this is my own view, my own suggestion on what I think it can do. Apply a share in the refinery as a payment guarantee to provide a petroleum equalization fund and an under-recovery for any difference between the regulated price by the government and the delivery price on the price of PMS. I think that's a way for you to defray the issue of subsidy and to guarantee supply. If you have domestic refineries that can produce PMS, which are higher distillates and quite a number of other products, we don't have any business importing crude oil at the rate at which we import.
Technically speaking, I'm still going to go back to that. Any idea what the price of petrol will be realistically moving forward? I'm still trying to find it here. I can't see it. Do you have it? Do you have any idea?
I'll tell you that the real north of the price of PMS without under recovery is anywhere between maybe 950 to 1,050 naira per liter. But of course, the government cannot put up that regulatory price because of the current realities.
That's understandable, Kelvin.
It's just going to keep going up.
That's a very highly inflammable price. I'm not sure I'm with you on that. But a very big thank you for those insights. A very extensive conversation tonight on the state of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, or NNPC. Thank you so much. Have a great week ahead. Kelvin, Emmanuel, economist and public policy analyst out there in our Abuja studios.